Welcome to Resilience Talk, hosted by Paul Spencer of Second Nature Solutions. Let's dive in.
Next up in the ownership series is corporate structure. So this one, I would say out of the 8, this is my least knowledgeable area. So we'll go through it. Of course, at a high level, we can understand the pieces and the parts and how they play out. This one, though, has a lot of nuance to it because we're talking about corporate structure, like entity types, S Corp, C Corp, lots of different ones. We'll talk about those. But it also affects different tax strategies as well. And so this is perfect for your CPA, any kind of a business advisor you have, financial advisor, somebody who may be working with your estate planning or trust planning. This is the area you want to have conversations with them. You want to make sure that you bring in. So we're in the middle of the ownership series. And just to review, we have financial performance, growth potential, key dependencies, recurring revenue, right to win, corporate structure, which is what we're going to talk about today, key management and leadership, and then lastly, owner involvement. So I've mentioned this caveat for all of them so far is that these are the ones that I've gathered from different friends and people in my network. This is how they tend to think about it. Again, if you go out into ChatGPT, Google, you'll find variations of these. You'll find a lot of them, like financial performance will probably always come up. And right to win will probably always come up because those are the ones that rise to the top as far as key valuations. But in the end, they're going to overlap. They're going to be different. We're just trying to get the gist so that my aim for you is that you take all of these ideas, which are just kind of spread out onto the board, and then you can be strategic about where you want to go, where you want to be focused on, where you want to target, and where you want to go to work on. And so that's the point of all of this. So if we think about corporate structure, like I already mentioned, there's the entity, essentially the legal registration of your organization. So we tend to think of those as LLCs. The big ones are, at this point, are S Corps. And then you've got your C Corps, right? And so I don't know the history of this very well, but at one time, C Corps were the best ones to have because of the tax advantage and how those things were set up. And then there were changes, I think, and I could be completely wrong on this, but there were things changed around how the S Corp was structured, and it became more friendly. So I would imagine most of you are S Corps. But there are probably a good handful of C Corps as well. So but it's also a good reminder that just because the registration of your company today is the best one, given your situation and given your tax implications and your ownership structure, that we recommend you use the C Corp. Well, you may have different regulatory, either state or federal changes, or even into the tax codes for state or federal, or just how the entities work themselves. And so those things can shift. What's good for today for the C Corp may make this S Corp better for you 10 years from now, right? So it's just to be aware of that. So there's the C Corp, the S Corp. I'm not going to get into the nuances of all of those and why one is better than the other. That's things we can talk about, but there are experts in that can give you infinite amount of more detail than I can. So just know that the tax filing and the ownership structure legally is different between the two. C Corp, S Corp, right? S Corp is a pass-through. C Corp has different tax filings. So there are other ones that you can have, which is more of a partnership. You can have an ESOP, which is an employee owned organization, 100% owned by the company or by the employees. You can have B Corps, which they're not nonprofits, but they're very focused on social aspects or environment aspects, and they operate similar to a nonprofit in that in its vision, the organization is focused on a social cause. So you could have a traditional technology business that is a B Corp, and what that means is that maybe some of the profits, some of the things that we do within our culture are focused on a certain aspect within the community. You could have different holding companies. You could have a holding company with different types of entities underneath it. And what that does is that gives you the ability to have different carve-outs. So I could sell a subsidiary of my holding company and still hold on to the rest, right? There's a new thing called Series LLC, which is a similar concept where I could have a series of LLCs that are separate but also enjoined. And you can do a similar thing, meaning I could sell this product off because it's a separate Series LLC. So anyway, those are the different entities that we register within our own state or maybe outside of our state. And those are important because, as you know, as an owner, they affect your accounting process and they affect your tax process, right? So how often are you paying taxes? What are the rules on distributions at the end of the year or during the year? All of those things come into play depending on the entity that you have. So when we're thinking about as a buyer, that is important because that corporate structure that you have will be part of the sale transaction, right? Which would mean maybe that I have to, as a buyer, add more cash, or maybe just based on the holdings themselves, it will reduce or increase the amount of value that I get cash from the purchase itself. So anyway, those are nuanced. There's lots of industries, businesses that handle that. They'll know that way better than I do. Those are my quote unquote banker friends. So when we're thinking about what's the best for your situation, you're really trying to understand, getting advice, and having a good sense of what is your estate planning. So what's your personal family wealth? What are the members of your family? What's your beneficiaries look like? Who are they? How old are they? How many are they? All of those kind of play into your estate planning, obviously, but they may also feed into as an input in the type of business, the corporate structure that you choose for your business. There's also obviously what we already talked about is the tax planning. You may have executive planning as well. So as I onboard new leadership, new executives, my corporate structure may give me more options on, maybe I give them some more equity. Maybe I have kind of a profit share or an opportunity to claim options, right? All of those things fit into the type of corporate structure that you have. And then obviously there's employee planning. So if I have hundreds of employees, thousands of employees, I may have a different entity just based on the size and how I want to do compensation plans and things like that. What kind of flexibility do I want? So when we think about corporate structure and the 8 evaluators that we're looking at, the valuations that we're talking about, corporate structure is pretty low on the list, meaning that the most important thing is financial performance, and then likely we get into right to win. Where are you in the market? And then there's those middle ones that Each buyer is going to move some of those around, but those are really the top two. Recurring revenue could be up there as well. But corporate structure is pretty far down the bottom. They're not going to look at corporate structure first and say, C Corp, probably not going to buy you. I don't even care what your financials are, right? That's not going to happen. So they're going to go through their due diligence as normal, and they may be aware of your corporate structure at the beginning, but that doesn't really come into play much until the end where we're going to make a deal, right? And now we have to figure out what that transaction is going to look like based on the entity that you have. So I think that's important to know that, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, is out of all of these, the ones that are going to give you a big bang for your buck on if I'm going to sell or if I'm just looking to increase the value of my asset, it's most likely the other ones that I'm going to be focused on. Those ones take more time to establish, mature processes, right? All the things, getting reputation within your market. Corporate structure, we do have the ability to change our corporate structure. Is it painful? Yes. Is it complicated? Sometimes. Can it take a long time? Yeah. But in relative terms to the other ones, it's manageable, right? All right. So, but where we do get into deal breakers, and I wanted to highlight this because I think it's important, is when we do get to that part where, okay, I'm interested, I want to buy, let's look at your entity and your corporate structure. Things that can break the deal is a complicated ownership web. So the complicated ownership web is basically we've got cousins, we've got nieces, nephews. Just over time, we've allowed, I would call them micro shares, entity shares to be equity shares to be distributed across our family. And all it does is it complicates the structure, the deal, because now, depending on your entity and the rules that you have within shareholders, some of them have to approve, or there has to be a sell, and then you have to agree to a price, and then you have to pay everybody out, and then it just adds so much complication. And if that's not well documented, and you don't have a nice clean cap table around that, then the deal can break because of that. The buyer gets skittish. It's a lot of work. I don't want to do that, right? And that can get very complicated. So another one could be embedded tax liabilities. So you, some of you have actually done this recently, is you were a longtime C Corp and you've converted to an S Corp, and there's a time frame with that. I think it's 5 years, but I could be wrong, for that whole conversion to complete, because there may be some embedded tax liabilities that you have to basically wear off over time for you to be for you able to get out from under some of the C Corp tax liabilities that you have. And then you become able to have the S Corp and then operate as S Corp in order to sell. So those could be some of the deal breakers. There could be regulatory issues. So if you're a lawyer firm, a legal firm, or a medical practice, right? You're called a professional service, and you're not going to be able to transfer those over. Those are really difficult. They're just non-transferable. Loss of current contracts, which basically means that as a license issuer, right? There may be, when we transfer the sale of ownership, that in the contract it says that when we change ownership, then maybe we have the right to go shopping for another vendor or to cancel our contract outright. And that could happen with vendors or customers. So that's something to be aware of. All of that does fit into the entity registration. Things that we want to think about, though, for how important these things are. You have to be aware So be aware of these things. Talk with your CPA, with your business advisors, your financial advisors to make sure, again, that you're aware of any changes in the law or changes in the IRS regulations. But know that this is not always, it's not always where you want to spend a lot of your time, unless you have one of those deal breaker scenarios. Then it's worth jumping in and trying to simplify your ownership structure, right? Your equity table, your cap table. Maybe understanding, looking through your current contracts and looking at some of those things. So anyway, most of the time, the buyer is just going to see your corporate structure as, like if we wanted to use a buying a home analogy, we might say the home's not real clean and well kept, but it's not really going to keep me from buying the house, right? It's a dirty home, and maybe it will, over the long haul, it will reduce the number of offers you get and maybe slow down the process, but it's rarely going to be the deal breaker all by itself. So that's important to know. One other thing before we wrap it up is that you do have options. So I kind of mentioned this at the beginning, is the other ones kind of take longer, right? So to get your growth potential, your revenue, recurring revenue, that takes time. It takes some maturity. You can make a decision that you're going to sell your company, or you're going to put it out on market, if you want to call it that, and in 5 years or in 10 years. And you can give yourself kind of a 3-year-ish window, even 18 to 24 months prior to when you want to put the shingle out for sale. And you can make your entity conversion if you wanted to. So I want to go from a C Corp to a S Corp because of whatever reasons. And so you don't need to do that right now. If you're only doing it for the sale or for a potential sale to make it better for the buyer, you can do that with some good planning of about 1.5 years, 2 years. And then that's typically just some paperwork. Doesn't mean it's easy, and it's not always clean. But you go through the process and you're done, right? As opposed to when I want to sell, I don't have a good sales pipeline. My recurring revenue is a little stop and go. And if I'm wanting to sell, say in the next 2 or 3 years, that's going to be a big headwind for me. I'm going to have to really, really pump it out and make sure that I can make those things clear up. But that's also going to, those forensics are going to be left in my financial performance, right? And the customer is going to be able to look backwards and say, geez, for a long time, you didn't have any recurring revenue. And for the last 18 months, 24 months, you've improved, but what's going on there, right? And you may say, well, we weren't good at it, but then we did get good at it. But it's still a risk for them because you don't have the track record necessarily over the long haul that has proven the longevity of your business. So anyway, you guys get it. It's, again, fun conversations, I think, to be thinking about the divergent thinking, all these different aspects. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. It just has to be aware, and then we can figure out where we want to go to work.